As its 100th anniversary date approaches, Patrick Gregory looks at which happened in the Planet War I fight of Belleau Timber and asks why it occupies such a specific location in US war story. In Deceased April, a picture prospect showing Emmanuel Macron, Donald Trump card and their relevant wives landing a young tree on the White's building grass was beam about the planet. Following the cameras head leftward, and the image and trip towards, which brought more than transparency was the next insight how the youthful Wood in issue had been remote quickly following the lightly uncomfortable rite, undertaken in interim isolation period. Which reached less than focus at the period was wherever the young tree had go of and why, a little timber 50 miles of Paris, the Bois de Belleau in France's Aisne division. Belleau Timber, a murderous face of WWI, occupies a specific location in the annals of US war story, and previous and urgent screen of US ability on the battleground. As in largest such a scenes of slaughtering of the at first planet warfare, it is the just the fight monuments and cemetery how offer any key as to which happened 100 year back. Set among little villages and cultivated land 50 strange miles polar east of Paris, Belleau Timber is as peaceful now as it undoubted was up the fight erupted down there in June 1918. And how fight was cruel. I was in France newly, concomitant aside of US war story film goer who were trace sites of 1918's key battles in the work up to the year's true century. I was affected, as I had been up, not just by how knowing groups love these were on the entire band of Planet War I's battles, but as well by how acute they were to trip all sites irrelevant of the Union nations implicated. US battlefields affirmative, but as well ones related in UK, France, Canada, Australia or New Zealand military. But for two of the side in special, former Marines and Vietnam veterans, industry was yet industry. All the stops on the way, consisting to US battlefields, were but a accession to website of Belleau Timber close the inland Marne. Which happened down there was an essential time in the growth of the USC housing and the Americans' deposit in the warfare. By May 1918 the US had been a fighter in the war for above a year, yet its military, yet inbound in France, had therefore far play just a support part. How was to changing? The US expedition strength Captain John Pershing had today obstinately resisted Union efforts to company opt his men, a regiment there, a regiment down there, to add to their own ranks, left established to boat train and collect a completely fledged troop of his their own. The time now arriving for at first us led unpleasant of the warfare. On May 28, 1918, Pershing's trust at 1st Department, the large Red A, attack at Cantigny in northern France, 20 miles southward of Amiens. The transactions proven a successful. Of bounded strategy importance, maybe, but the 3-day fight however shown how the US military could struggle and acted as a mental increase for the AIF. Yet, of more than instant anxiety to the Allies was the new and fatal foe unpleasant that had been initiated 50 miles southward east of them, cut readily via Union Channel and drive future southward to the inland Marne, outgoing Deutsche forces during remarkable range of Paris. On May 30 some US divisions, the 2nd and 3rd, were orderly in the region, inbound of various directions east and western. A car gun division of the last provided the southward banking of the Marne at the key foothold of Château-Thierry as some of their quantity began to come on the stage. But the major activity of the week's front would lie polar west of the city, comprising men of the 2nd Department, in special, 2 of their regiments, a team of Marines led by Pershing's old head of personnel James Harbord. It would be their efforts to save a forest down there how would seize headlines, helping in portion by the crimson fiction of reporter Floyd Gibbons. Belleau Timber was slight more than rather than a me length and part a me broad, yet it would price lot lives to seize and would be informed through the planet. It was maybe a little fight in regulation of Planet War I, says Professor Andrew Wiest of the College of Southern Mississippi. Yet it was outsized in historical significance. It was the fight how intended how the US had arriving. Yet as operative go, as courageous and stubborn as the soldiers were, it was hardly planned and ill-commanded, surely in its discovery phases. Following adjoining areas were seized, the judgment was undertaken to preliminary on the timber on the afternoon of June 6. But slight intelligence had been transferred out as to which to wait while they got down there, and just insufficient ordnance flame was laid downward in advance. Within, Deutsche car gunners had undertaken up official position in defense holes, over rock outcrops and screened by tight underbrush. Worst, the Marines now progressive to them in grade, forming above the vulnerable land external. They were slain. By twilight, 222 were corpse and above 850 injured. Blood-stained but concentrated on the problem, they went once again the following date. And the one following how. But slight progress was creature done. An intensive ordnance barrier now aimed accompanied by yet else attack. The human loss installed, but yet the Deutsche military dug in. The fight labored on for 3 weeks, and in its definitive stages, leg by leg, brush to brush, it strengthened in wildness. Guns and grenades gave way to bayonets and frog stickers, 8-inch triangle blades set on trunnion handles, as the Marines crossed their way via the recent of their foe. As the history goes, Deutsche commanders, in their fight accountable, called to the Marines as Teufelsschunde Hell Dogs, and reporter Gibbons as well helping, singling out one artillery sarge in dispatches as Hell Dog Gibbon. Each path, the behalf and picture jammed and went on to be a sea talisman. It was the day the U.S. Marines went of creature a little strength few human beings knew on to embodying elitist statute in the U.S. war, says Andrew Wiest. The housing had cradle date behind to the US War of Autonomy but of Belleau, down their advanced lot of its contemporary bridal and mythology. More than considerably, and of strategy significance, there intervene at Belleau and how of their 2nd and 3rd Department associate at the period in the nearby region, on the Marne put pay to the Deutsche preliminary, at which was a hazardous time in the war for the Allies. The captain of the U.S. at 1st Department Robert Lee Bullard proclaimed following it, "This Marines didn't win the war there. But they stored the Allies of destruction." Had they arriving a few several hours after, I believe how would include been the start of the late. France could not include stood the losing of Paris.